Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome. Good evening. This is your host, Danny Dhaiphong. As you can see, I am joined by returning guest and friend of the show, Scott Ritter. Scott, how are you doing this evening? Good to be back with you.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Great. So, yes, let us get Rockfin going. Everyone who's joining on YouTube right now, be sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notifications bell, help boost this stream in the algorithm. Also, welcome everyone who's on Rumble and on Rockfin. All of that should be starting very soon. And what else? Yes, go to the video description and be sure to check out scottritter.com for all the ways that you can support and follow Scott's work. But we can just get right started here. Let us start, Scott, with the insinuation or rumors or conversations that are happening in Washington about approving long-range strikes for Ukraine, so Ukraine can use long-range capabilities to strike deep inside of Russia. Zelensky is about to meet with Joe Biden in Washington. Joe Biden has said that they're working on this issue, and there's a lot of enthusiasm about this on the Ukrainian side, and it seems to be a lot of desperation and heavy pushing to allow this to be approved. Scott, what is the risks here, though? What exactly will this portend should it be formally approved? If you could just talk about the significance of this.
The risks of thermonuclear war. I mean, this is literally lunacy, the definition of lunacy. I don't understand what the Biden administration's seeking to do. I mean, I know we have a policy of supporting Ukraine, et cetera, but is Ukraine worth America? I mean, are we saying that Ukraine is an existential extension of America? That if we lose Ukraine, we lose America? Therefore, we're willing to bet it all on this vain hope that Ukraine can somehow stabilize this situation, right this ship, and move on to victory over Russia, understanding that Ukrainian victory over Russia means the end of the world. So either way we go, we appear to be saying that we're willing to put the lives of all Americans at risk for Ukraine, because that's the logical, that's the way this logically plays out. In the short term, I think Russia will do as Russia's always done, show an ability to absorb these provocations, to manage the escalation, because Russia is focused on strategic objectives, like the big one in BRICS in Kazan next month, the BRICS summit, that will redefine the world in a major way. Away from American hegemony to multilateralism, moving BRICS from theory to reality, following through on the promise made by Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping in February of 2021 when they met prior to the Beijing Olympics in Beijing, and said that the rules-based international order, that is the foundation of America's foreign policy and national security policy, is a threat to international security, and that the Russians and the Chinese will now spearhead an effort to supplant it with what they call the law-based international order, something that reflects the values enshrined in the United Nations Charter as opposed to the unilateral dictate of America. Putin, I don't think, is going to allow anything to happen that will disrupt BRICS. And that includes making sure that Russia doesn't overreact to any provocation by the Ukrainians at the behest of their NATO masters. Now, if Ukraine is dumb enough to hit something of strategic value or inflict harm on Russian national level command and control, I think the game dramatically changes, and therein lies the problem. You see, the United States isn't in control of this. We think we are. We think we're providing the weapons. I'm pretty sure that this green light that we're giving them comes with heavy caveats on where they can and can't strike. But we've just seen the United States, repeatedly push through its own red lines. Remember, Joe Biden once said that doing this could lead to World War III. Well, you're doing it, Joe. You're doing it. So, yeah, I agree with them. This could lead to World War III. This is one of the most dangerous things that has happened in modern history. This is a total disregard on the part of the United States for the lives of humanity. To do what? Again, I just have to ask, to do what? Score propaganda points, give a failing Ukrainian leader one last go around at legitimacy. What are they trying to accomplish from this? Because it's not going to defeat Russia.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what I was going to ask you, Scott. What exactly could they do with this newfound permission? Because it is my estimation that there aren't many good options here for Ukraine. So perhaps you could talk about, well, what exactly are the options that will be afforded Ukraine once this approval comes down the road, and how will it change anything given the situation that Ukraine currently finds itself in?
Well, on the one hand, it will give the United States the ability to say that we did everything the Ukrainians asked us to do as Ukraine fails. Um, it's a short-term boost for Volodymyr Zelensky, who will say, look, I'm the guy who's standing up to Russia. They may get some propaganda, opportunities if the ATACMS hits an airfield and takes out some Russian aircraft, hits a command and control center, takes out a Russian general or two. Um, that's it. Russia's a nation that knows war, and Russia has already lost generals. So killing two more isn't going to change the thing. Russia's lost aircraft. Blowing up a half a dozen more isn't going to change a thing. So this is purely a PR stunt that unfortunately is going to result in a lot more dead Ukrainians. Look at the Kursk PR stunt. Yesterday the Russians began a counteroffensive that's just slaughtering, and I mean an emphasis on slaughtering the Ukrainian soldiers, and it's going to continue. The Ukrainians don't have the resources to halt the Russian advance in the Donbass. Sooner or later, the Ukrainians are going to break there, and we'll have to suffer the embarrassment of retreating behind the Dnieper River. So this is the PR stunt by Ukraine to, I guess, try and convince more European nations to reach deeper into their coffers, to pull out more money and more military equipment to, rebuild the Ukrainian military yet again, so that whatever, troops they're able to muster can sally forth and be slaughtered, because that's all that's going to happen. Ukraine is not going to win this war. Ukraine is not going to turn things around. And we acknowledge this. There's not a single American leader that's saying, oh, this is going to give Ukraine the ability to flip the script. No, every American leader says there is no magic weapon. There is nothing that's going to, in and of itself, change things. But I guess there's still this forlorn hope that by dragging this war out, that somehow that'll weaken Vladimir Putin's resolve and the will of the Russian nation to back Vladimir Putin. Somehow the Russians will voluntarily hit the quit button. But that's not the Russia that I encountered when I visited last year and earlier this year.
Yeah, I mean, you can even see it in the debate last night between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. The hosts, the so-called moderators, how they approached the conflict was all about, do you believe that supporting Ukraine is important? Do you believe that it's all about garnering up this support for Ukraine?
Do you believe that Ukraine must win this war?
Yeah, exactly. It's about beliefs almost, and hopes, but it's not much about the reality. You talked about this counter offensive that Russia is now launching in Kursk. We don't hear as much about Kursk anymore since the initial intense drive by Ukraine to usurp territory. Now it seems that Russia is on the counteroffensive, as you said. What exactly is happening? You said a lot of Ukrainians are being slaughtered, but Where will this go?
I mean, it'll go until every Ukrainian is driven out of Russian soil, and then probably continue until Russia establishes a buffer zone in Sumy Oblast to keep Ukrainians from repeating this error. There's no other alternative. I mean, it's not like Russia's going to say, oh, well, I guess you get part of Kursk. It doesn't work that way. Russia will reclaim all of its territory, and it'll do so emphasizing violence. You know, all Kursk did is give the Russians the opportunity to open up yet another front in this war of attrition. And business has been very good. You know, we're talking upwards of 12,000 Ukrainians have been eliminated from the field of battle there. We're talking about maybe they went in with 20 or 30,000 reserves. They're coming close to losing 50% of their strategic reserves. And the battle is only now just getting, you know, joined in by the Russians, by serious Russian forces. The Russians may have assembled up to 60,000 troops to take on the Ukrainians. And when they destroy the Ukrainians, and they will destroy the Ukrainians, these troops will have some sort of operational momentum that will enable them to push further into Ukraine, causing the Ukrainians to lose even more territory.
Yeah, yeah, and as you said, there isn't really anyone talking about Ukraine turning the tide anymore. I mean, even CNN has been talking about just this massive exodus of Ukrainian troops from the front lines. Something like this year alone, like 19,000 or so, just leaving, running. I mean, escaping, fleeing from the front lines. Could you talk about this crisis for Ukraine on the front lines, in particular? What exactly is causing this crisis right now? Because we're hearing about it from the media to an extent, but it certainly did not receive attention in the debate last night. It isn't there. There isn't glaring alarms for the American people.
Well, I mean, according to the Biden/Harris narrative, Ukraine is heroically resisting the Russians. They're inflicting horrific harm on the Russians, destroying equipment, killing and wounding men. And they're causing economic damage to Russia. Russia, according to the Western narrative, is superficially covering for this by pumping up their defense industry. But according to the Western narrative, this is creating irreparable harm on Russia's civilian industry, that eventually the Russian economy will collapse because of this war. And then with it, Vladimir Putin's political support will collapse. And hopefully the West will end up with either a Putin that's gone into exile or a very weakened Putin who will be compliant to Western demands. That's the that's the dream of the West and of Ukraine. But that's not the reality. The reality is far different. Where this is going, it's not going to end well for either Ukraine or the West. Remember, we got to view this war in a broader perspective than simply focusing on the battlefield. Remember that this started off as primarily an economic war before. We talked about sanctioning Russia. The whole goal was that we were going to sanction Russia into submission. That didn't work. In fact, it backfired. And now we have Europe in an absolute economic tailspin. We have Germany collapsing. The political consequences of these economic problems is devastating. Britain's on its 5th prime minister in 5 years. Germany's Olaf Scholz looks like he's heading down the toilet bowl of political life. His coalition did not fare well in the regional elections in Germany, in Thuringia and Saxony earlier this month. France is in a political crisis with Macron reaching down to the 4th or 5th party to find a leader because he's not willing to accept the will of the French people and empower the representative of the party that won the most votes. It's just Europe is in a free fall. The economy is trashed because of high energy prices and bad decisions, including the diversion of over 150 billion euro into this conflict in Ukraine. Meanwhile, around the world, nations not only have failed to side up with the West and sanction Russia, they are siding on Russia's side. And we see this in the upcoming BRICS summit. Again, this is going to be a game-changing event that's going to redefine the world. And, and the reason why it's happening is because of the conflict in Ukraine and how the West has, overplayed its hand, trying to bully people through economic sanctions, through indirect and direct pressure, threats, to yield to the policy imperatives of the United States, and the world is saying no. One of the key things that's happening right now is de-dollarization. I don't think the United States has woken up to the fact that 158 nations have committed to the BRICS conceptual plan to de-dollarize. This is huge. This will have a devastating impact on the economy. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on that's outside of the framework of, the battlefield that people aren't taking into account. We tend to get very focused on the battlefield, how many dead Ukrainians, how many destroyed tanks, what's going on, how are the arrows moving. But as you pull away, the battlefield becomes less and less important. I mean, the most important thing about this battlefield is the war of attrition, is the fact that the Ukrainians are grinding up Ukrainian manpower, mercenary manpower, Ukrainian and NATO provided equipment at a rate far greater than they're able to replace. So Ukraine just gets weaker every single day. Russia, on the other hand, is bringing in troops that far exceed daily casualty rates. They're equipping them with modern equipment. They're able to repair equipment. So Russia's getting stronger every day. Ukraine's getting weaker every day. And eventually the correlation of forces will be such that Russia will be able to readily, roll over the Ukrainian military. So, that's where things stand.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I do agree with you. We are almost at this point of being beyond the battlefield, so to speak, because while, of course, there is a war being waged on that battlefield, there is this, I think, what we've talked about so much on this show, Scott, the reality on the battlefield is really a reflection of what's happening more broadly, and that is that this conflict has not gone in the way that the United States and its NATO so-called partners had hoped it would go. And whether that's the economic war or whether what's happening on the battlefield, I mean, even now, they do have to acknowledge that not only is Russia making gains, but they have to acknowledge that whether it's by silence or actually saying it, that they're not achieving the goals that Ukraine had, which is to supposedly take back all of the territory that Russia has been able to, incorporate into the Russian Federation. None of that is remotely possible, right, Scott?
Not as things currently stand. No, I mean, I could have, I guess, if Russia proves not to be as resilient politically and economically and militarily as they appear to be, I guess one could hypothesize a scenario where the Russian people rise up and demand Vladimir Putin's ouster. And then, as a result, the new Russian government yields to all of the Ukrainian Western demands and returns Crimea and returns the Donbass and returns Novorossiya, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. I mean, I could, take a lot of meth, I guess, and maybe that scenario would make sense. But reality kicks in, and that none of that's going to happen. Vladimir Putin won an election in March decisively, even though he was the only viable candidate on the ballot. Generally speaking, when that happens, people, tend to not participate. They become disgusted in the process, and and so you get low turnouts, and your margin of victory is similarly deficient. But now, what we had was a record-breaking turnout, which means that by participating in the elections, the Russian people are in effect saying that they trust the system. And 88% of those who participated in the election picked Vladimir Putin to be their man. It's unprecedented. This is a genuinely popular leader who has a broad mandate to govern. And one of the reasons why the Russians trust him to govern is he's done such a bang-up job for the last quarter century. He's the guy that took Russia out of the doldrums, not worse than the doldrums, out of the depths of the abyss. Russia has been fundamentally broken by a decade of neo-colonial abuse at the hands of people who claim to be Russia's friends, the United States, Great Britain, the European Union, and others. They were just going into Russia to rape it economically. And Vladimir Putin put an end to that and rallied Russia. And today, Russia is a very, very successful nation state.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And none of this, again, for those who may be listening who believe this is just parroting, Russian talking points or Russian propaganda. All of this has been acknowledged by the United States and by NATO at some level. Even in the last week, we've had just a slew of articles coming out, publications, CNN, New York Times, I believe today, just talking about the really difficult, if not absolutely impossible situation for Ukraine on the battlefield, which, of course, you will not see the media say, well, Russia's in a great position and it's stable and it's become this powerful nation state. But by having to acknowledge this, the default is that Russia is in a lot better position than what has been made out to be by the collective West. And so any final comment on this before we move on?
No, I mean, I just, again, want to remind people how close we are to nuclear war, that the irresponsible policies of the Biden administration are pushing Russia into a corner from which they may have no alternative but to, use nuclear power to resolve the situation. It's not that Russia's looking for a fight. It's that the United States and NATO are creating the conditions of an existential struggle that Russia will have to make some critical decisions on how to proceed. We know that the Russians, they've announced it, that they have redone or rethought their nuclear posture. I had an interesting conversation with Ambassador Polyansky, the deputy ambassador at the United Nations. And I said, look, I don't know what Russia's policy is, and it's probably secret. But if you study Russian doctrine and you study the history of Russia, the development of their doctrine, how Russia traditionally, views nuclear weapons and the potential of nuclear war, you'll know that Russia has taken a stance that's more deterrence-based than anything else, that they seek to deter anybody from using weapons against Russia by promising that if weapons are used against Russia, they'll be able to, wipe out whoever attacks them. Russia's had to change this because of the realities that they face. These long-range strike weapons we talk about, understand that if they're incorporated into a NATO plan, which is something Russia's been concerned about from day one. If you recall, going back into December of 2021, when the Russians submitted their draft treaty, one of the main things they said is we have to keep long-range NATO weapons out of Ukraine, because Ukraine, if you take a look at the map, just extends into the depth of Russia. And from the Ukrainian border, you're able to reach cities and strategic locations that, otherwise, if this was still the Soviet Union, there'd be no chance for weapons to reach. If NATO deploys these weapons on Russian or on Ukrainian territory, even if they're, painted with the Ukrainian flag, you now have the ability to deliver at a moment's notice a precision strike offensive capabilities that could be delivered preemptively, meaning try and take out Russian command and control, take out Russian early warning, using these Ukrainian proxy forces, and then follow up with NATO's own long-range strike missiles, again, designed to suppress and destroy Russia's ability to respond, and then, if necessary, hit Russia with preemptive nuclear attack to take out their strategic, nuclear retaliation capabilities. From the Russian perspective, you got to sit there and say, this is all a possibility. And when we look at the policy of the United States and NATO to strategically defeat Russia, it moves from being a possibility to a probability. And so how does Russia respond? Russia has to come up with its own nuclear doctrine. How do you preempt preemption? And that's what it is. Because if Russia's concerned about these missiles, these Western missiles in Ukraine being used as the initial salvo in a preemptive strike by NATO and the United States against Russia, how do you preempt that? By positioning yourself even further forward with a more sensitive hair trigger and be able to respond instantaneously to any perception that NATO is getting ready to launch a preemptive strike, which means Russia's posture is going to be conducive to error, mistake, miscalculation. There's a movie out, Reagan. Look, if you're my age and you grew up in that era and you were a Republican or conservative, you're going to love this movie because it sort of captures the legendary aspects of the individual. If you're a Democrat, you're going to hate this movie because you're pre-programmed to hate Ronald Reagan regardless. But the interesting thing about this movie is it captures, I think, the danger of the era that we lived in, the 1980s, extremely dangerous era. And they show a White House Situation Room where the nuclear football is being opened up and Reagan's being told, you got to launch now. You got to launch now. They've detected Russian ICBMs inbound. If you wait much longer, they're going to be able to hit. We're not going to be able to get things out. It's going to be a disaster. Respond now, respond now, respond now, respond now. And Reagan held off just a little bit. And right when he was getting ready to yield to the pressure, the phone rang. And apparently, according to the movie, which is supposed to be with these set piece places, supposed to be based almost directly on transcripts that were of the meeting at the time, it turned out to be a flock of birds had set off a radar that misinterpreted the signal to be an incoming missile attack. We almost went to war. We had Able Archer 83, a military exercise where we were testing our own nuclear command and control systems, and the Russians said, we think this is a cover for a preemptive strike, so they put their nuclear forces on alert. One mistake, wham, we're all dead. This is the reality that we face today, and I want every American to know that we are closer today to nuclear annihilation than we have been at any time in our history. It's a far more dangerous situation today that we face than was faced by JFK in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Back then, even if there was a nuclear war, we're talking about extremely limited capabilities. I think the Russians had 4 ICBM equivalents, and only one of which was on the launch stand that could be fueled up. The others would probably never get fueled up because they'd be attacked preemptively and destroyed. Today, the Russians have the most sophisticated strategic nuclear deterrence the world has ever seen, both in terms of advanced submarines, bombers, but for the Russians, more critically, these modern intercontinental ballistic missiles, the Sarmat, the Yars, and others with these multiple warheads, precision guided. This is the Russian nuclear arsenal, and it's ready to go. And if we give them excuse, they will go, because as Vladimir Putin says, he can't imagine a world without Russia. And if the world wants to make such a world, then Russia will do what it takes to prevent that. That means use nuclear weapons.
Well, let's talk about how we got here. Victoria Newland was recently on, our good friend Victoria Newland. She was recently on I don't know who this guy is. His name is Zygar, some journalist. so-called. Well, she was on this, and this is what she had to say about her role in terms of scuttling peace back all the way in the beginning of this conflict in the March and April negotiations. Here is what she had to say about it.
There was a story first told by former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett that both sides were really close to the end, to the successful end of the negotiations, and then Prime Minister Boris Johnson interfered and stopped prevented Ukrainians from signing the deal. And then Ukrainian Representative Arahami kind of confirmed it, that yes, he said in an interview that there was some kind of advice from Boris Johnson to stop negotiating and to win this war militarily.
I just have to say before we go on, Scott, first, apologies for making you sit through this, but also she just can't stop smiling. I'm just gonna throw that out. She just can't stop. It's a very strange thing. But let's finish the minute, and then I'll have you comment.
Where is the myth? Where is the truth?
Relatively late in the game, the Ukrainians began asking for advice on where this thing was going. And it became clear to us, clear to the Brits, clear to others, that Putin's main condition was buried in an annex to this document that they were working on. Mm-hmm. And it included limits on the precise kinds of weapon systems that Ukraine could have after the deal, such that Ukraine would basically be neutered as a military force. And there were no similar constraints on Russia. Russia wasn't required to pull back. Russia wasn't required to have a buffer zone from the Ukrainian border, wasn't required to have the same constraints on its military facing Ukraine. And so people inside Ukraine and people outside Ukraine started asking questions about whether this was a good deal. And it was at that point that it fell apart.
Scott, your reaction to this?
Well, I mean, it's a selective reading of history. It first of all ignores why Russia initiated the special military operation and the role that Victoria Nuland played directly in removing the constitutionally elected president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, and replacing him with the extreme wing of the Ukrainian nationalists, using oligarchs as a proxy. But basically what she said is that Ukraine was willing to have a peace. She talks about weapon systems, but she doesn't dig it. Ukraine had NATO weapon systems, and part of demilitarization was to take the NATO out of Ukraine, and that was unacceptable to her and their fellow NATO members. They wanted Ukraine to remain a heavily armed Western proxy that would fester on Russia's boil, weakening Russia, because Russia would forever have to be on the alert for the spread of the infection. So she downplays that. But her smile is what gets me, because she thinks she's so cute. And yet what she did, and Boris Johnson did in terminating this peace process, is condemn hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians to die, perhaps 100,000 Russians to die as well, tens of millions of Ukrainians to be displaced from their homes, their jobs, trillions of dollars of national treasure to be wasted, squandered. The infrastructure of Ukraine is in ruins, especially their energy infrastructure. She killed Ukraine, and she's smiling about it. She thinks that this is a good thing because she never cared about Ukraine, never once. She doesn't today. She didn't last week, and she damn sure didn't, 2 years ago when this war started. She only cares about the naked exercise of American power and what it takes to maintain and sustain this American power. And one of the tactics used by the United States is to use other nations in a proxy fashion, so that they pay the lion's share of the human cost associated with conflict. And that's what's happening in Ukraine. It's so bad that Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, can go in and just openly say, we need you to go fight and die so we don't have to fight and die. What heroics. And he talks about Ukraine sitting on $1 trillion worth of natural resources that will be good for our economy. At least he says it. At least he's honest about it. I mean, I despise him. I despise his position. But the one thing you can say about Lindsey Graham is, he wears his heart on his sleeve, and he's not hiding, where he stands from anybody. It just so happens that he stands on the side of evil.
Yeah, and that quote from Lindsey Graham, I actually have it now, because I think it is important to play here, because they say it. This is not, again, people say, oh, this is Russian talking points. Just look at what this is him literally with Vladimir Zelensky saying exactly what you said, Scott.
I'm here with President Zelensky. I am such an admirer of what you and your country have done. You're trying to stop the Russians so we don't have to fight them. They don't want any American troops. They just need weapons to free their country of a terrible invasion. They're sitting on $1 trillion worth of minerals that could be good to our economy. So I want to keep helping our friends in Ukraine. We can win.
Good for our economy. I mean, they're saying it.
Yeah, they're saying the secret part out loud. But I guess that happens when you are so removed from reality. You live in your own little this political bubble that these senators have allowed to drop down on Washington D.C. I don't think he understands how bad that sounds and how bad that looks to the average American, who is saying, we don't want this war. We don't want to expand this war. And I mean, it's got to make you feel uneasy. I mean, first of all, where's American pride? Since when did we have proxies fight our battles? I mean, I'm not encouraging an American conflict in Ukraine at all, but I'm just saying that, as a nation state, why are we farming out the fights we claim to be essential to, how America will posture itself globally over the course of the next decade? Why do we farm that out to other nations? I thought we were supposed to be the ones to get this stuff done. Lindsey Graham, is a senator in the latter stages of his career. He's somebody who I think is totally out of touch with reality, but it doesn't matter, because the people that vote him into office every 6 years likewise are out of touch with reality. This is the danger of ignorance. The irony is you have the FBI running around, harassing people like me, and saying that, that I'm disseminating Russian propaganda, that I'm disseminating Russian talking points. And I say, well, the only talking points I disseminate are my own talking points. And, what makes an American speaking Russian propaganda, especially when I, control everything that I say, everything that I write? It's because I have decided that, as was the case in Iraq, the United States is pursuing bad policy based on a lie, and that they need to be exposed for this. That doesn't make me a tool of Russia. That just makes me a good journalist or something. But the United States fears this. We're at a stage right now where we're shutting down voices in opposition because we don't have the ability to put out better ideas. Again, I refer to the Reagan movie. Ronald Reagan in 1984 was subjected to the biggest outside campaign interference effort ever run against the United States by the KGB, straight up trying to put the thumb on the scale of the American election to keep Ronald Reagan from having a second term. Did Reagan send out the FBI? Did Reagan shut down everything? No. Reagan just said, let's get better ideas and let's communicate these ideas better. And what happened? This election campaign in 1984 that the Russians were supposedly trying to throw, to I think Walter Mondale was his opponent. Mondale won one state, his home state. Every other state was a sweep by Ronald Reagan. Because Americans don't vote because the Russians tell them who to vote for. Americans vote based upon who they want to vote for better or for worse. This idea that we, the people of the United States of America, are susceptible to this kind of propagandizing from Russia, from China, from Iran. They run a few Facebook memes, a couple of videos, and it's, oh God, I suddenly woke up and feel it's like the Manchurian Candidate. You flip over the Queen of Hearts and, oh, we're going to go vote for this person. It doesn't work that way. It never has. It never will. The American people, the American voter is able to discern right from wrong, fact from fiction, and ultimately make a decision that is derived from their own individual, beliefs. Russia doesn't sway that, can't sway that, and I don't believe is trying to sway that. But the FBI has become weaponized by the Department of Justice, which has become weaponized by the Biden administration, where they're simply, making things up, literally. And we know this because at the trial of the Uhuru 3 on day 5, the lawyer defending the Uhuru 3 got the lead FBI agent on the stand, and he acknowledged that all of the statements made in the indictment of some of these, one of the man who was running for office amongst the Uhuru 3 was all a lie. That in the indictment they implied that this guy was working on behalf of Russia. They said, "Do you have any evidence of that?" No. It says that he was working with Russian intelligence officers. Do you have any evidence of that? No. The bottom line is they made everything up. It went into an affidavit of probable cause, got a judge to sign off, and allowed this man to be arrested and put on trial. But it's disinformation run by the United States government. The United States is afraid of the truth. We're afraid of the facts. We don't want to engage in a debate, a dialogue, or discussion. If somebody dares stands up and says, "Hey, look over here at the reality," then they turn the FBI on them. This is the politicization of the American judiciary and American law enforcement to achieve, the objectives of the Biden administration.
Yeah, and it's always an insult to ordinary people, ordinary Americans, to be told that something that the vast majority of people here in the United States really pay very little attention to, which is this idea that they are being dictated by foreign powers in ways that really can't be quantified or proven. And it's similar to how the media, especially the Western media, talks about the ways in which China or Russia does business abroad or relates to other countries, like African countries, for example. African countries, their people and their leaders are always framed to be just completely subsumed by the great power of Chinese and Russian manipulation, when in fact that just negates that. Well, maybe African leaders and African people, they can decide for themselves who they want to do business with, who they want to get close with. Maybe the United States, if it were to maybe increase their trade volume with these countries by 10, 20-fold, then maybe they could compete with a country like China, because that's currently the gap. But they don't want to say this because it's much easier to make it's much easier for someone like Victoria Nuland to just smile her way through, because she doesn't care about people at all. She doesn't care about Ukrainians. She doesn't care about Americans. She doesn't care about anyone at all, except for herself and those who make her career possible. It's much easier for them to frame it all in this way. But your thoughts, Scott?
Danny, I'm going to have to admit right now, you're looking at a man who is fundamentally exhausted, and I lost track here. Just give me a quick.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay. No. I was just saying that people like Victoria Nuland and those like her, they frame everything in a way where it's Americans or people, they're just manipulated by powers like Russia or China.
Oh, yeah.
It's much easier for them to do that than to acknowledge the reality of of what role they're playing in the catastrophe that's unfolding.
Yeah, they don't want to take credit for it. I mean, again, I'm going to fall back on Ronald Reagan because I was a Reagan Republican. I mean, he was the first president I voted for. I joined the military gladly to serve under Ronald Reagan. I know people are going, "What a brainwashed fool you were," perhaps. But back then, America owned it. I mean, we, for right or wrong, for better or worse, we were damn proud of who we were, and we owned it. And we didn't silence opposition. We just came up with better ideas, or we thought we had better ideas, and we defended them. We didn't back away from it. We didn't shy away from things. We were engaged in a ideological war with the Soviet Union, and this required us to sell America aggressively abroad, and we did so. And for whatever reason, we prevailed. It was just a different mindset back then. We weren't scared of our own shadows. Today, our politicians don't sell America. What they do is they put down the opposition. Again, Donald Trump. I'm not a big fan of Donald Trump. I've made this clear. I know there's a lot of Trumpies out there that don't like me because I'm being honest, but I don't like a lot of what he says and how he behaves. It's not presidential. But I will say this: that son of a bitch defends America. I mean, for better or for worse, he's up there. He's defending America. America, right or wrong. That's the way it used to be. His opponents, they don't defend America. They attack the people that dare call America out for the problems that exist in America. During the Cold War, when we were engaged in ideological conflict with the Soviet Union, we actively sought to learn about the Soviets. I mean, it was an amazing time. I loved being in the intelligence business back then because we truly wanted to understand the Soviet Union. We had experts, people who studied it. And remember, we were as red, white, and blue as it gets, hyper patriotic, if you want to say that. But that didn't mean that we sat there and we just threw, name calling. You dirty communist, you this, you that. No, that's for the pedestrians on the street to do. The experts dug deep to learn. In order to learn, you had to learn about the culture. You had to learn about the language. You had to learn about the history. You had to have an appreciation for the enemy. You had to do what John F. Kennedy said we need to do, put ourselves in their shoes to see the world from their perspective, so that we can better understand where they came from. When you were a Soviet expert, you were supposed to be able to literally role play a Soviet in any brainstorming thing. What would the Soviets do? And it better not be guesswork, and it better not be child's play. They're evil. They would do this. They would do that. You have to say, no, I think I've studied this general. He studied at the following academies under this guy. The doctrine is this, that, and the other thing. The Soviets would, culturally, da 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 da. And you try and get in their mind and think like them, so that you can explain how the Soviets would react, so that we can best come up with a war-winning, strategy. That means, we weren't afraid of them because we were confident about who we were. We weren't insecure. Today, the Biden administration does not want the American people to know anything about Russia. Why? They don't want the American people to know anything about China. Why? Because we're intimidated by Russia and China. We're intimidated by what they've become. They don't fit the cartoon characterizations that we put out there about them. I mean, again, I'm still in the learning process of China, but my God, the cities, Chinese cities, clean, mass transit, all the things that we lack in our cities, high-speed rail connectivity. It's just, it's stunning. And it's not just that. There, I remember a couple years ago, one of the big things in the energy security world is, the transition to alternative energy sources. And China was one of the, came out and they said, we're going to achieve that net zero, that, where we need to be on carbon by, I forget what year they put out there. It's very aggressive time frame. And all the Western people went, but they said, before we do that, we're going to continue to, build coal plants, oil plants. We're still going to be pumping out carbon. And everybody see the Chinese, they don't mean it. They're just going to do that. But the Chinese thing was, while we're keeping our economy running using this carbon stuff, we're going to be building a parallel capacity using this renewable stuff. And when we get it online, we'll be able to drop this, bring this up, and not skip a beat. See, we don't do that in the West. What do? We shut down, like Germany. They shut down all the coal burning plants, shut down the coal mines, and then put up a bunch of wind turbines that can't generate enough power. So then they have to buy Russian gas, but then they're told, no, blow up the pipeline and you're not going to get Russian gas. Now they're left to a wind turbine that can't provide the power, and they have to bring the coal plants back up. Doesn't make much sense. The Chinese cities, I'm not an expert, but I've been looking at pollution levels. 10 years ago, if you take a look at the Chinese city skyline, it's just, clouds of noxious gas, pollution, smog. Today, you look at Chinese cities, and it's pristine. Why? Well, I don't know the exact number of cars, but the electric vehicles are everywhere. And the Chinese are just crazy about electric vehicles. I mean, we just built a Stewart's down the road where we put in some Tesla charging stations, or I guess they're generic. So if you have a non-Tesla car, but so charging stations are there. You know how inconvenient it is? I don't have an electric car, but you know how inconvenient it is to charge a car? It's not like filling up with gas. It's very inconvenient. But in China, and again, I only heard about this, but let's say I got my electric vehicle and I'm going on a trip and I'm planning my trip. Now I do this. If I'm going across country, I'm going to New York City. I know that between now and New York City, I'm going to have to fill up with gas. So I roughly know where the gas station is going to be and all that on the trip. I've plotted it out. In China, you know how far you're going to get on a battery. And so you plot it out. They have, I guess, their cars now, you just dial ahead and you say, hey, I'm coming in for a battery change. They go, okay. And you drive in with your electric vehicle, you pull in, plop, 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 and it's quicker than filling up your tank of gas. Your old battery comes out, the new battery comes in, and off you go. And then they take that battery out, they recharge it. And that's how you try. So efficient, so efficient. We don't want to talk about that in America because it's embarrassing what we are. In Russia, they say, well, it's propaganda about the subways. Maybe, but it's true.
Propaganda. That's true. That is also possible.
The United States has a problem with truth. I'll give you an example. In this trial of the Uhura 3 that's taking place right now in Tampa, the judge, they were coming up with definitions, and the Uhura 3 kept saying, well, you keep calling it disinformation, but it's true. And the judge says, well, disinformation, it doesn't matter about the veracity of the information. What makes it disinformation is that you're going against U.S. policy. So the judge is basically saying that as an American, we're guilty of disinformation if we dare call out our government on its lies, because the government is the only one that's allowed to put forth truth. And we are practicing disinformation if we contradict their truth. Everything we're being told about Russia, everything, literally everything, and I can say this because I know Russia, everything we're being told about Russia is a bald-faced lie. How do we defeat this? Because it's not just the politicians, Danny. It's the system.
Yep.
My daughter graduated from Georgetown University, the Foreign Service Institute. This is the elite place to train the up and coming minds that are going to, guide America in this global environment that we're in. This is where you're supposed to learn about the world. No, what Georgetown does today, and I'm saying this straight up to the Georgetown staff, if you're watching this and you know it, you rubber stamp clones. That's all you do. You don't teach people to think. I looked at my daughter's curriculum. I worked with her, and she did all her own work, but she would talk to me about what's being taught, how it's being taught. You did not encourage free thinking. You encourage conformity. If anybody dares step out of the narrow lane, I'm not talking about wide lanes here. I'm talking about narrow lanes of academic criteria. I want to think about that. No, bam, you got to come right back in here, because the State Department was monitoring everything you were doing. Even if the people getting educated had nothing to do with the U.S. government, the fact is they were at Georgetown. They had to become Georgetown people, so they had to be turned into these clones. Stanford does the same thing. Harvard does the same thing. Columbia does the same thing. So all these kids that are supposed to be the world changers and think critically and with an open mind. That's what I was trained to do in college. I'm not saying I was the greatest college student. I drank a lot of beer and I played a lot of football, but I did try to learn about Russia at the same time. I had an open mind, and my college was all about take it where you want to take it, Scott. No, boom, narrow lanes. So now these people come into a system that is literally a wall of round holes, and you've got to come out and be a round peg. If you come out as a square peg, you don't fit anywhere. They discard you. That's where we're at. This is why Victoria Nuland, coming back to the original proposition, this is why she gets away with this, because nobody challenges her. When she lies, everybody just nods. This is why Michael McFaul can get away with this, because the system isn't designed to challenge anymore. Back when I was in, it wasn't, the entire process of making policy and implementing policy was a continuous adversarial relationship. What I mean by that is you didn't get to go up there and say something and just say it. And everybody went, yes, boss, everything's good, boss. Yes, we are zombies. Man, you came up there and first thing you were supposed to challenge them. And then they came back. Well, you're saying this. How do you know that? Well, you better have done your research. If you didn't, wham, you're off the stage. And then you do this. They say, yeah, you read that, but did you read this, and the other thing? Well, yes, I did. I brought it in here. Bam, bam. Next thing you know, you're having literally one of the most intellectual conversations imaginable. And I'm talking about with a bunch of Marine Corps company grade officers, the most intelligent conversations I have ever had, bar none. And I've been in a lot of places with a lot of smart people. We're at an officers club in 29 Palms with a bunch of Marine lieutenants and captains who were talking about global events because they couldn't take anything for granted. They weren't conformists. And what they did is they challenged everything. I was the intelligence officer, and I'd be talking about world events. And these guys are coming back at me. We are having a knockdown, drag out, intellectual combat fight there. And I loved it. That doesn't exist anymore. You are conformist. This is why Victoria Nuland can say what she can say, and she doesn't get thrown out of the room. She doesn't get run out of DC. We are a nation of frickin' sheep.
Yeah. I mean, and this has been a growing problem over the course, especially of the last several decades. And everything you said you had a lot of great points, Scott. When I was just in China, and everything you said about electric vehicles and transportation, all of that is just 100% true. It is.
That's disinformation, Danny. Disinformation.
It's like you can just see it on the streets. The numbers are there. Even Western media will acknowledge that there's about 60% of all vehicles now in China are electric vehicles. People in China would like just giggle about how ridiculous it is to make such a big deal about something like having millions of charging stations all around the country, so that it is super easy if you need a charge to charge your vehicle, similar to literally like you could be in a garage, like in a mall or something, and there are charging stations there for your electric vehicle. in the millions. This exists all across the country. It's not a secret, and it's not something that is a big deal. It's just something that makes a lot of sense. It's just much more efficient and cheaper. These cars are cheap, and the reason why they're cheap is because of the fact that it is much cheaper to produce an electric vehicle than having to. China doesn't pump its own oil, so it's much easier to produce an electric vehicle than to purchase oil on a now a heavily sanctioned world oil market, and pump a diesel vehicle with a bunch of gas. So that is the reality, and but we can't even fathom this here in the United States because of the way that people like Victoria Nuland, they're the ones who have leadership. They're the ones who are backed by interests that make a lot of money and you get a lot of political favor and clout by promoting this real disinformation. But Scott, I wanted to transition to the Middle East if we could, because I wanted to ask your opinion on what's going on there, especially in regard to, it's been a while since we last spoke, and there has been a retaliation by Hezbollah for Israel's, various transgressions and multiple transgressions on Fawad Shakur, the assassination. Now there's talk of, and it seems like there's always talk of, a ground operation that Israel will launch into Lebanon against Hezbollah. What do you make of this? Is this something that's going to happen? And if it does happen, what will occur?
Well, I'm always loath to make predictions because in order to make predictions, you have to, back when I was an intelligence officer, that was my job, to do predictive analysis. But I would only do that after I would, interrogate my boss to find out exactly what it is he wanted to know. And then based upon his direction, I would build an intelligence collection plan using the resources available to collect the various things, because I'd break down his direction into what we call essential elements of information, the specific pieces of knowledge we need to know, and then I'd collect on it. And then I would be able to evaluate each answer to the essential element of information based upon the quality of the intelligence that was derived from the collection plan. I would say, okay, this, I have an answer, but I'm not too confident in this answer because the source was a drunk prostitute who, claimed to have access she probably didn't have. Or I would say, I'm really confident in this one because we actually intercepted the phone call where they laid this thing out. This one, I'm even more confident because I got the document. And so you look all that, you weigh it in, factor it in, and say, okay, based upon the totality of this, I'll now do my analysis. And I will say that these are the top 5 possible, courses of action. And I'll rate them from most likely to least likely and explain to you why I did it. That's what I used to do for a living. And so here you've thrown something at me. Is Israel going to go into Lebanon? Well, I don't know. First thing I have to say is I don't know what's driving Netanyahu. I can guess what's driving Netanyahu. This is, I think, the 3rd time in recent history that he's threatened to launch a ground incursion into Lebanon. Each time, the Israeli military pushes back and says, we can't do it. We don't have the resources. It's a fight we're going to lose. The definition of an insanity is, expecting a different outcome, even though all the other factors are the same. So I am led to believe that Netanyahu is not serious about going into Lebanon, that this is posturing on his part. Then you have to ask yourself, why is he posturing? Who is he posturing to? Is he trying to intimidate Hezbollah? No. What he's trying to do is mollify a right-wing coalition, governing coalition, that refuses to accept peace as a possibility. Why? Because they're linked to Netanyahu, to his future, and his future is only guaranteed so long as Israel is in a perpetual state of conflict. The moment Israel accepts a ceasefire against Gaza, the moment they normalize the situation on the border with Lebanon, the Israeli people will say, well, we no longer need this ridiculous right-wing cabinet, and it's time to put in a new Israeli government. That means that Netanyahu's out. And if Netanyahu's out, he's not going to have the protection of politicized courts anymore. And he will be arrested and put on trial for corruption and maybe some other charges too as well. That's not the future that Netanyahu wants. This is all about Netanyahu. It has nothing to do with the legitimate national security concerns of Israel. If it did, there would have been a ceasefire a long time ago. The hostages would be home, and Israel will be, again, knowing Israel would be trying to buy time to get the world to forget about a two-state solution. Israel would be courting Saudi Arabia to normalize relations. And once Saudi Arabia normalizes relations, the Gulf Arab states will fall in place. And then there will be no chance of a Palestinian homeland. That's what a Zionist should be doing. But Netanyahu can't, because he failed on October 7th. It's a huge embarrassment to him. He has sacrificed Israel's military in Gaza, weakened it to the point that it can't do its primary mission of defending Israel from Hezbollah and from Iran. So there's a lot of posturing by Netanyahu while he tries to buy time. He's looking at American elections, what's going to happen on November 6th. Who's going to win this election? That'll tell you a lot about which direction. Can he hold out till November 6th? But what does he have to do to hold out? We have hundreds of thousands of Israelis in the streets protesting against, Netanyahu, creating the conditions in which hostages are being killed. They blame him for that, rightfully so. How does he stave off these hundreds of thousands by threatening to go to war against Lebanon, getting against Hezbollah, getting the Israelis distracted? So that's his game right now. He is literally just moving from one crisis to the next, and just keep things moving so that he remains at the center of power in Israel. The moment these pieces stop moving, he loses viability. He's going to leave. So I don't think Israel's going into Lebanon. It'd be foolhardy. The Hezbollah is ready for this. Hezbollah's made it clear that if Israel goes in, A, Hezbollah is going to crush them, and B, Hezbollah is going to counterattack, and the war is going to be fought in northern Israel, not in southern Lebanon.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I don't know if you caught this. There was one of these many summits in Washington, hosted by one of the many think tanks that do the business of thought leading these catastrophic wars. But an unnamed U.S. official, senior U.S. official who participated in what's called the Middle East America Dialogue, said recently at this summit that there's an idea, quote, let's go to war and then we will destroy all the missiles Hezbollah has and everything will be fine. It's not that simple. There's no magic solution. The other side cannot be annihilated at the end of the war. Israel may pay a heavy price and not achieve its goals. Scott, isn't that what has already happened in many respects?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, understand that Israel versus Hezbollah is something Israel's been preparing for some time now. In 2022 and 2023, they ran major war games that talked about what would happen if we were attacked all at once on every possible front. The major front that Israel prepared for was Hezbollah. That's where the greatest threat comes from. And so, the Israeli army was coming into this battle fresh, with the fully 70% of their military capability committed to that fight, and they still didn't win in the exercise. Now we have today, one of the things that the exercise never conceived was what would happen if Hamas attacked Israel and compelled Israel to send 300,000 troops into Gaza for a year. No one ever thought about that. What would happen? Can you fight a war with Hezbollah when your army is exhausted, when you've run out of spare parts? The Israelis have never been configured to fight a war of this duration. Logistically, it's unsustainable. Emotionally, morally, physically, The Israeli military is absolutely worn down. So they have defeated themselves. I mean, they have created the conditions where they can't do what's necessary to achieve victory. If they were to start a fight with Hezbollah today, I think Hezbollah would unleash hell. I mean, it reminds me of that opening scene of Gladiator, when Russell Crowe's unleash hell and all the firebombs going up. Hezbollah would give you something similar to that, except it would be very precise, very targeted, very devastating. And then they'd follow it up with a ground incursion into Israel. Yes, you heard me right. Hezbollah would pour in maybe 10, 20,000 troops who would seize Israeli towns, Israeli villages in the north, penetrate as deep into Israel as possible, and then force Israel to fight urban combat against Hezbollah forces dug in. So Israel would be destroying its own cities instead of destroying Lebanese cities. So, it's a mission impossible. So Israel's already defeated itself because it's incapable of meeting, the parameters for victory. They cannot get rid of the Hezbollah missiles. They cannot destroy the Hezbollah forces. They cannot drive Hezbollah north of the Litani River. They cannot defend the north of Israel.
Yeah, and I wanted to now ask you about comments made by Iranian Major General Hossein Salami. He said that, quote, "The nightmare of Iran's decisive action shakes the enemy, Israel, day and night, and we see visible signs of the end of its political life." Scott, what have you made of now Iran's ongoing response, which seems to be a response to Israel's incursion into Tehran, murdering top Hamas, the former top Hamas negotiator? What have you made of its ongoing response? Because this has been the framing of it since for the last several now weeks and months.
Well, I mean, again, the Iranians, a lot like the Russians, think strategically, not tactically. I mean, there's a lot of people out there saying, well, Israel crossed that red line when it assassinated the senior Hamas leader, that Iran now has to follow through with its pledge to retaliate decisively. And the fact that Iran isn't retaliating decisively has caused a lot of people to say, oh, look, they're bluffing. They can't do it. Iran's weak. They didn't mean it. Israel has deterrent supremacy. Let's back up just a little bit. What did Israel have to do to successfully defend itself against the Iranian attack in April? They had to bring in massive quantities of foreign assistance, American aircraft, British aircraft, who had to deploy in a way to blunt the Iranian attack by shooting down drones and cruise missiles, so that the Israeli surface-to-air missile dome, so to speak, the Iron Dome, Arrow 3, Jacob Sling, I think, or David Sling, I don't know. So they come in and these things can shoot things down. But that requires constant preparation. And so what the Iranian general is saying is, every day Israel wakes up not knowing that this is going to be the day that we're going to launch the attack. It's not just Israel waking up. The United States is waking up. We've deployed multiple carrier battle groups that are now deployed in a manner designed to serve as a shield to Israel. We're launching aircraft, and we have aircraft on alert so that we have to surge them into the airspace in Jordan to shoot down these missiles, or over the Red Sea to shoot missiles coming in from Yemen. This is a problem. There's reports that our carriers are only deployed or only have 85% of the manpower needed, which means that the people on the carriers now, in order to maintain this high level of efficiency, aren't getting rest. They're becoming exhausted. And Iran hasn't launched everything. So now I'm the Iranians, and I'm sitting there going, all right, every day we're costing Israel and the United States X number of $1 million. We're exhausting them. They're not able to focus on other things. They're focusing on this. If we don't attack today and tomorrow rolls around, they'll have lost even more money. They'll get even more exhausted. We're winning without doing anything. And I think that's what the Iranian general is saying, is that merely putting Israel on this perpetual state of, of readiness for an attack that isn't manifested itself exhausts Israel. It eats up resources. It exhausts the United States. It eats up resources. Meanwhile, Iran continues to put pressure on Israel on all the other fronts. They're resupplying Hamas, probably through Egypt, probably through tunnels, but they're resupplying Hamas. Hezbollah continues to, fight effectively, incorporating new weapons coming in from Iran. The Houthi haven't been defeated. In fact, they continue to successfully blockade Israel's southern ports. They disrupt traffic going through the Suez Canal. It's been devastating to the Israeli economy, devastating to the Western economy. The diversion of ships around, South Africa, around Africa, costs millions of dollars a day. So if I told the Iranians that, hey, if you simply do nothing, you're going to bankrupt the enemy, they'd laugh at me, except that's literally the situation you face today. Iran doesn't have to launch this major attack. They're bankrupting Israel. They're exhausting Israel. They're exhausting the United States. And I don't know if Iran will ever attack. Remember, Iran wants, they're a member of BRICS. They want this BRICS summit to succeed. One of the things that could cause BRICS to fail is if there's a general conflict, for instance, between Israel and Iran, Israel and Hezbollah, that is disruptive to, nations who otherwise would be at, in Kazan in October, working with Russia, China, and India to construct what in effect is a new world order, and built around the concept of multipolarity as opposed to sustaining American singularity.
Yeah, there's nothing more disruptive than an entire region engulfed in maybe a war that has not been seen in any generation that is currently alive at the moment. Should something like that occur, should Iran and Israel find themselves in direct conflict. And, this gets me to maybe to close on the Middle East, this recent talk of Russia, Iran, ballistic missiles, because it seems to be another excuse to level more sanctions on Iran. And there seems to be a dual purpose here, making up excuses through Iran and Russia's military partnership to both allow Ukraine to strike in long range form on Russia, and to increase sanctions on Iran in the hopes that it will not escalate any situation in the region, which is guaranteed. I think, as you said, Scott, I think all your points were true, but also to what in the end of the day is an agenda of the United States, large sections of its political elite, to weaken Iran and destroy Iran, and of course the rest of the axis of resistance. What has been your reaction to this talk of Russia and Iran and the exchange of ballistic missiles to Russia?
Well, first of all, we know that Russia and Iran have a strategic relationship that has a heavy militarized component. They signed a secret deal with secret annexes, a little more than a month ago. We know that Iran has collaborated with Russia on the provision of, specific drone technologies, up to and including the ability to manufacture these drones in Russia. So the idea that people go, it's ludicrous. The Russians and the Iranians would never cooperate in this level. They are. Now you have to say, well, okay, why would Russia want a specific family of Iranian missiles? We're talking about a surface-to-surface missile with a range of around 75 miles. Well, Russia has transformed the way that it supports its troops in battle in terms of firepower support. They've learned from the realities of modern war, this attritional warfare. They've studied how the Ukrainians operate. They know that what the Ukrainians do doctrinally in terms of having a position, holding the position, and seeking to rotate troops out. So you'll hold the position, you'll bring in the rotation forces, you'll get them ready, they'll surge forward, bring out the other troops who will then go back. So the Russians have seen this. They see patterns of behavior. They understand templating of the battlefield, where the likely assembly areas will be based upon past practice. Then they'll have a drone overhead looking, and they see indicators that the troops are starting to assemble. They need to strike that right now. The weapon of choice to do this can be one of these fab bombs with the wings, or what they can use are Iskander missiles. The Iskander has a longer range. It can strike deeper into Russia or into Ukrainian territory, but it's also capable of hitting this, targets at the, 75, 50-mile range. The Iskander used to be held at the army level. What the Russians have done now, in the way that they've reconfigured their approach to war, maximizing firepower, is they've taken, Iskander formations at the army level, and they've broken it down and have dedicated detachments down to the brigade level. So a brigade commander now can call in fire with the Iskander missiles. Very effective, very deadly, devastating the Ukrainians. But when you increase the potential for use of Iskanders, you increase the actual expenditure of the ammunition, and don't be surprised when your tactics consume more munitions than your industry is capable of producing. The Iskander missile is produced at the Vodkinsk machine building plant, probably using old SS-23 lines, or lines that have been converted. They could possibly modify some of the production lines that produce CNC machine tools. Why do I say that? Because it comes down to man hours used in the processes, similarity of processes. And when I did a paper when the Cold War when ended, about the convertibility of the Vodkinsk machine building plant, and one of the things was taking these missile assembly lines that had been used on SS-23s or SS-12 scale boards, and how do you convert them to civilian use? And you have to look at the manpower, man hours, all the things, similarity of production processes, to see if there is the possibility of convertibility. And then if it does, then you retrain troops. The point I'm trying to make is, I think the Vodkinsk machine building plant is maxed out on its ability to produce Iskanders. It's a high demand item, and the Vodkinsk machine building plant is maxed out. Russia still has a need for these long range strike systems. So they either build a new factory, a new machine building plant, which is very expensive to do, isn't going to happen overnight, or they buy a similar system straight off the market from a provider they trust. Iran has a system that does precision strike up to 75 miles deep. So what Russia's going to do is buy a bunch of these. I think that the talk is 200 initially. I'm sure it'll be more. And if it's something Russia likes, then Russia will simply retool and make it on their own at a different plant. But the point is, Russia's now going to be able to, without skipping a beat, maximize firepower potential at the front line at a moment when the Ukrainians desperately need the Russians not to do this. Ukraine is on the breaking point. Their military is losing men. They can't replace them. They don't have reserves. They don't have the equipment. They're stressed, stretched everywhere. The last thing they need is for the Russians not only to sustain the level of firepower that they're able to bring to bear on the battlefield, but increase it by bringing in, Iranian capability that can fall in directly. The Russian troops are already being trained on it. They're going to come in, fall in, and start employing it. They have the operations already worked out. They've incorporated a fire plan. So these things are going to come straight in, and the Russians are just going to seamlessly continue to press on. That's my theory. And it makes so much sense that I'm convinced that Iran has, in fact, provided Russia with these missiles. And that's just the way it is. It's hypocrisy for the West to go, oh, you can't do that.
Right.
Good Lord, you gave him ATACMS, you gave him HIMARS, you gave him Abrams, you gave him Leopard, you gave him Challenger, you gave him F-16s, you've given him everything. And now Iran gives Russia, missiles, and apparently that's the greatest sin on the planet.
Yes, indeed. Final topic, Scott. Final question, or final topic, I should say. A lot was said. We've run the gamut here. A lot of your talk. It's interesting when you're talking about Ronald Reagan. I didn't grow up in that era. My view on U.S. presidents is that they all have their huge blemishes. Reagan era austerity economically, the warmongering in Latin America, Central America. But a point you made that really stuck, because it reminded me when I was young, voting for Obama the first time, there's this identity that the U.S. did have vis-a-vis the Cold War that did have a basis to it, in the sense that the U.S. did not feel as insecure as it does now globally. It did have a position in the world. We have to acknowledge it, no matter how much we agree or we disagree with policies of that era. It was a position of dominance. In many ways, when I voted for Obama the first time, that was kind of the impetus of like, a return to that, right? Like a return to that idea that the U.S. can look good and be good while maintaining dominance. Just so happened that the Obama era is really the twilight and the end of that. But now we are entering, you mentioned it a few times, Scott, the BRICS summit in Kazan, and a lot has happened as we lead into this big October meeting in Russia. You have Turkey filing for application member status, Azerbaijan. I'm probably forgetting many other developments that maybe
Venezuela, Malaysia, Serbia.
Yeah, Venezuela, Malaysia. I know Mongolia has been invited, as Vladimir Putin visited, and Mongolia did not have Vladimir Putin arrested by the ICC's fraudulent orders. So a lot has been happening around BRICS and this summit, and it makes me think about this idea that actually it's now the world that is developing an identity independent of U.S. diktats. So talk about what you expect for this summit. I know you don't like to give predictions, but are there any expectations that you see will be pursued, whether they happen or not?
Well, I mean, we've seen dramatic developments here. One of the interesting things about BRICS is the West just doesn't understand it at all. And I'm shocked. I deal with some very intelligent people who specialize in monitoring global energy security. In order to do that, you have to, have your finger on the pulse of geopolitics around the world. But this Russian conflict has, when you create clones, don't be surprised when they behave like clones. We have across, all of journalism, academia, think tanks, there's a bias, a strong, heavy bias against Russia and anything Russia, so strong that we are incapable of thinking rationally about Russia, that we turn Russia into a bunch of, simple cartoon characters, Boris and Natasha from Bullwinkle, Spy versus Spy from Mad Magazine. And we actually believe that that's the way it is. We demonize Vladimir Putin, call him a brutal dictator. But when you say that, you forget the fact that this man governs not by dictating, but by listening, by absorbing, by asking questions, by absorbing, by coming up with consensus-driven solutions that are implementable. This is why Russia has been such a success for the last 25 years, not because Vladimir Putin is dictating everything, but because that man travels all over Russia and listens to people, listens to his governors, listens to the mayors, listens to the local economic planners, asks intelligent questions, demands intelligent answers, and then formulates sound policy that took Russia out of the hell that the West put Russia in the 1990s to where Russia is today. This is the thing. these people don't know how to view BRICS. I mean, I tried to make BRICS. I tried to say, I said, in order to understand what's going to happen in Kazan in October, you have to first go to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, because that literally was a massive BRICS ministerial. That's where Russia brought everybody together and began conditioning the world for the dramatic changes that are going to take place. You know, it would have been impossible to have these changes except for the war. If Russia hadn't gone in to Ukraine and the West hadn't overreacted and sanctioned Russia and create the conditions for the divorce of Russia from the West, if the West hadn't pressured, taken advantage of the Ukrainian conflict to say, hey, that's going to be Taiwan if we don't stop it, and pressure China and force China to say, how do we deal with this? If we didn't try to strong arm India into, going against Russia, a natural ally, in China, a regional competitor that India recognizes you don't want to go to war with them. You want to learn how to peacefully coexist. We put everything, it's like creating an artificial diamond. Normally to create a diamond, it happens over time. It takes a long time to make this diamond. Well, that would have been BRICS if there hadn't been a war.
Yeah.
Because it's very hard to have all these people come together and have multilateral consensus-driven agreement. It was a nice little forum. They were doing little things and all that stuff, sort of feel good, make you feel good. But then the war came and they said, we have to do things. We have to take this coal and we're going to put it into a pressure cooker and we're going to cook it down. We're going to get a diamond as quick as possible, a high quality artificial diamond. Last year in Johannesburg, in South Africa, BRICS did the impossible. Talked about expansion. In 2019, everybody's talking about Turkey's decision to join BRICS today. In 2019, Turkey said, we want to be part of BRICS. Straight up applied for it. And BRICS said, no, we're not ready for expansion. We haven't solved the basic problems of making the core five work. We can't be bringing in other people. But because of how the West responded against China, Russia, etc., they expanded it. And now Russia's job is to take this expanded BRICS and structure it, to create institutions that allow, on a multilateral basis, collaboration and coordination to take place prior to a BRICS summit. The old summits, people just sort of showed up with their guys, and it was like a week-long a seminar or whatever. No. Now what's happening is more like the G7. If you take a look at the G7 before they have the leaders' meetings, they have the economic ministerials, they have the foreign affairs, they have the security, and they work everything out so that when the leaders come together, there's already a plan. They have a strategy of what they want to accomplish. They're not making it up as they go along. BRICS doesn't have that infrastructure. Russia's building it. Take a look at what Russia has done since the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. They've been running ministerial after ministerial after ministerial. As we speak, there's a foreign minister's security ministerial. Yes, that's right. BRICS is talking about how do we basically, create a Eurasian counterpart to NATO, a structure that protects that which we're trying to build here. 158 nations have signed up to the BRICS, replacement currency concept, de-dollarization. I remember Donald Trump at the debate. I'm going to put tariffs on anybody that dumps the dollar. Well, the whole world's dumping the dollar, Donald. Good luck with that, okay? Good luck with putting tariffs on the entire world.
We thought inflation was bad now. Oof.
Yeah, day late, the dollar short on that one. But BRICS, what the Russians are doing right now is creating a real institution. It will become institutionalized, this concept of multilateral, consensus-driven work. And it's amazing what they've done. I mean, again, the West just seems to be oblivious to it. We don't, again, we've been conditioned not to give the Russians credit for anything. The Russians have mastered the art of diplomacy. Think what I just said. They have institutionalized multilateral consensus building. That's what the United Nations was supposed to be for, but thanks to Americans, again, the vetoes of the Permanent Five, that isn't going to happen. Now you have a situation where you have Russia, China, and India. The three don't always see eye to eye, and yet they're going to come together. The big three are coming together. And then there's going to be, I think, the big five, because you get Erdogan coming in, and Maduro shows up, and suddenly you're looking at, see, well, Maduro, what? You do know he produces a lot of oil, right? I mean, have people figured that one out yet about Venezuela's economic potential? And now you have Azerbaijan coming in, and suddenly you're looking at, if MBS comes, Lavrov was just in Saudi Arabia because, the invitation was extended to the Saudis last year to join BRICS, but they've sort of been like, I don't know, we're hanging out with the West. Do we want to jump ship? Lavrov came in and reminded Saudi Arabia why it's important to be on the right side of history. And I think MBS is going to show up. So now we're looking at a core level of people that will control global energy. Literally, they control the energy security of the world, directly and indirectly through the leverage that they can bring to bear on it. They're coming together, not just, like I said, coming together and spend a week, with knee-jerk reactions. There are preparations taking place. There are plans in place. They're falling in. This is a master class in diplomacy. This is the things that the United States used to be able to pull off back when we had diplomats, back when we knew how to talk to people. Again, you can talk to people when you're comfortable in your own skin. America has, I'm not saying that under Ronald Reagan, America did everything right. We know we didn't. But we at least tried to practice diplomacy, and we weren't scared of our own skin. When we sat down at the table, you may disagree with us, but we were there in good faith. We were there in good faith. We believed what we were saying, and we were, enthusiastic in our articulation of it. Today, we're scared of our own shadow. Literally, we're a nation of people that we're not comfortable of who we are. We're not comfortable of where we've been. We're in the process of destroying our own history, which means the foundation of, facts that define who we are and what we are is crumbling. So while the foundation is crumbling, as we redefine who we are as a people, we're expected to sell this now aggressively to the other side, and we don't have any good sales points. So what we do is we criticize them and we attack them. And this is not diplomacy. We're also a nation, again, I'll bring it up, we're addicted to war. Dwight D. Eisenhower warned about this in his farewell address. He said that the military-industrial complex, when paired with Congress, creates a cycle of funding and production that creates this artificial economic stimulus that empowers politically and concentrates economic power and therefore political power in a handful of military industrial organs that will take over democracy. Well, that's exactly what happened. And when that happens, we are a nation that, instead of searching for diplomatic solutions, which requires compromise, I mean, diplomacy is not easy. Diplomacy isn't about always getting your way. Diplomacy is about horse trading. Giving up a little bit here, giving up there, finding that nice median, the median, the where everybody comes together and goes, okay, we're good. Everybody can live with this? Yeah, diplomacy. We don't do that. We dictate outcomes. We say, the hell with you and your consensus. This is the way we want it. Well, we don't want to do that. We're going to sanction you. Do you touch the dollar? We're going to sanction you. Well, maybe I don't want to touch the dollar anymore. Then I'm going to tariff your ass. But then the worst part is, then I'm going to bomb you. That's all we know. Look at our solutions. Show me the last time we went in and did a solution that has, us building infrastructure exclusively. How do we go into Africa? We lead with the military. Ukraine, lead with the military. Every place in the world, we lead with the military. The military is the only solution we have. So our diplomats today wear stars on their shoulders.
Right.
That's the fact. In the Middle East, the most influential people are from Central Command, not the ambassadors. The ambassadors take a second seat to Central Command, who comes in and tells them the way it's going to be, tells the nation states there, because we only America is now defined by its military, and now we have a military that's in the decline. We can't afford to keep this military up and running. So we don't interface well with people. We've created a leadership vacuum that makes it easier for now BRICS to step in too. That's the other thing. It would be one thing if we can contest BRICS. It would be much more difficult for BRICS to get off the ground if Ronald Reagan's America was there, because Reagan would be going, well, I guess you're going to do that BRICS thing, but you know, we're America and we're the shining city on the hill, and we'd really like the. And people go, well, America's not that bad. We'll deal with America. We're not ready to jump ship yet. It'd be very difficult. But now the world's looking around saying, now this BRICS thing scares me. It's a little intimidating. We've never tried something like this before. But there's America, the warmongers. Yeah, we're going to do BRICS because we've turned BRICS into a viable alternative. BRICS is real. BRICS is game changing. If Russia is able to pull off this Kazan meeting, the world will never be the same. Literally, never. This is one of those moments. I mean, all you people that are alive today, understand this. This is a huge deal, what's going on. It will change the world. The world will never be the same. There's pre-BRICS and then there's post-BRICS. But this BRICS thing, once BRICS comes alive, the rules-based international order is gone. And that's all any of us who've been alive, that are alive today, have ever known, is the rules-based international order promulgated by an America that insists on being a global hegemon. That's the world we've lived in for the last 70 some odd years. That's about to change. It's a whole new world. I'm not saying it's going to be better, but it's going to be different. And it's going to be, you know, it's going to require a whole new approach. As Americans, this is the biggest problem, is going to be for America to accept the fact that we're no longer the king of the world, that we are one of many, not, you know, number one, that we aren't superior in everything, that there are many places around the world that where they have superiority. And people say, well, how could Americans ever? Well, ask yourself this. How has China lived like that? I mean, China, there's a long time where China was number 2, number 3, not number 1.
Or number 10. Yeah, or not even competing with Japan and South Korea. Just
did China roll over and play dead and go, oh, well, we don't exist, we suck? Nope. China asserted itself, moved on. Russia, they're not number 1 in many things, but they're a proud nation, and because they've taken what they have, which is considerable, by the way, and they've leveraged it diplomatically. America could be a world leader, not the world leader, but a world leader, if we just invested in diplomacy. We have good people, we have good ideas, we know how to get things done. If we shut down half of our carrier battle groups, if we stopped wasting money on, you know, new nuclear deterrence that we can't afford, doesn't work, if we, you know, shut down the nuclear enterprise, if we, you know, actually did audits of our military so we didn't have $2 trillion disappearing, we could cut our defense budget by 40%. And we're talking about a nearly $1 trillion defense budget. I could take $400 billion off of that. And if I just took 1% of that and gave it to the State Department and said, run wild, baby, run wild. Man, this would be a different world. We'd train good diplomats. We'd have our diplomats out there. We'd beef up our embassies, not to spy on people, but to work with people, to sit down and solve problems together. The way Americans used to roll up our sleeves. We were the problem solvers, baby. We came in and we solved problems. Let's do it again. Let's be that person, you know, because we can. It doesn't mean that we supplant the Chinese, but imagine if the Chinese are in an area of the world where things aren't going great. What if America came in and said, hey, need help? We're not here to push you out. We recognize you're here. Need help? We can help you make doing what you're doing better. In the process, you know, we can get involved too. And China would probably go, if you're sincere, sure, come on in. Let's help us out. Imagine if we live in a world where people said, let's solve these problems together. That's what BRICS is supposed to be, a multilateral, consensus-driven forum. America could be a major player in that if we could ever change the way we think, but we can't do that. America's only about dictating outcomes. We're not about working with people. We're not about sitting back and shutting up and listening. We have to come to the table, be large and in charge, and compel people to bend to our will. And so long as that's our approach to international interfacing, we're going to fail, and that's why we're failing today.
Yeah, and maybe to close on this topic, I mean, so many things that you said. First, this addiction to war, literally leading to the acceleration of BRICS. I used to cover and analyze BRICS and multipolarity before the Ukraine conflict, and certainly there was no expectation in my judgment that BRICS would become as influential now as it is. I mean, it was a conversation, it was an event, it was happening, and it was important, but it wasn't something that was going to move mountains globally. It was really, as you said, Scott, it was a work in progress among countries that saw very little actually eye to eye, other than perhaps benefiting from economic development, which is a very broad concept, a very broad relationship that may have taken generations to really come to fruition. And now we're not even talking about generations. We're just talking about every single year significant changes happening because of these BRICS summits. And what's ironic about it, Scott, is that BRICS has actually had to put a pause on formal expansion because now it is so big that as a consensus organization, and one that has, as you said, very little rules written, now they have to write these rules. They have to understand what they're going to do from here as a block, so to speak. Well, they might not, for lack of a better word, but still, with 40 plus countries wanting to join and these big heavy hitters like Turkey wanting to be a bigger part of BRICS, it's no doubt that this summit will lead to, at the very least, some way to incorporate those parties interested in what BRICS is trying to do. So it's a very interesting moment. And when I was in China, lastly, on this note, when you were talking about the potential of U.S. Cooperation, the idea that the U.S. can cooperate on a global basis that isn't attached to war. What was so interesting when I was in China, when I was in Beijing, I had to take a car a few times to get places during the lead up, not even the actual date. I left the day that the Forum on China Africa Cooperation was going to occur. I left it was September 4th. I was on a plane. I was gone. The days leading up to it, all the African leaders were coming in. I think they had actually like a ministerial meeting before the formal, before the formal forum. And the traffic was just so bad. Why was it so bad? Well, because China, it wasn't because the national military, the police, or anything like that were marching the streets and making everything so difficult. It was because there was traffic cops everywhere, ensuring that essentially African leaders had the roads. They had the roads. They were that was the priority, was that the African leaders who were coming to this were completely prioritized. I mean, it was almost insane. It was almost as if you go to New York City, the middle of Manhattan, if you had the entirety of Manhattan proper just essentially shut down, the major main roads shut down because African leaders were visiting. Yeah, it never happens. It never, it never happens here at that level because, the United States isn't doing that sort of thing. Sometimes traffic will get bad if Biden
you brought up an interesting thing about this Chinese African summit. Again, it's one of these things that you remember how I said the West doesn't know how to, intellectually absorb what China's doing in the world today. So, the Belts and Roads Initiative, the standard pushback, and I got this over and over and over again, is it's a Chinese debt trap. It's a Chinese debt trap. Belts and Roads Initiative is not going to work. I mean, I kept saying Belts and Roads. Literally, I had somebody I was working with, and I kept saying, I'd like to write about this. It's a debt trap. I said, have you looked at the infrastructure being built? It's a debt trap. It's a debt trap. The whole world's rejecting it. It's not going to work. Africa, China will never get in Africa. It's a debt trap. If it was a debt trap, the African leaders wouldn't be in China right now. It ain't a debt trap.
No.
It's how Africa is going to emerge as a global player by developing its infrastructure, because it's working with a country, China, that has decided that it's more important to build ports, roads, and bridges than it is to build military bases and put drones, armed drones in there. And that's the thing. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say the Chinese are perfect. They're not. I'm not going to say that the Chinese never negotiated an unfair deal. They have. But I will say this, over the course of time, the Chinese have rectified their errors. I mean, there's many situations where the nation has come back and said, we just can't do this. China went, oh, okay, well, we're going to forgive you this, we're going to do this, we're going to restructure this, and let's move on. That's just the Chinese they're not in this to take over the world. They're in this to make a better economic situation for China and for the people, because China understands that this isn't colonialism. You can't just suck the resources out that the nations that are, you want to build the good supply chains, and all this kind of stuff. It's oversimplification, but I just, again, want to reemphasize the point that if all the Belts and Roads Initiative did was create debt trap, you wouldn't have Chinese traffic cops stopping the traffic in Chinese cities to clear the roads for the African leaders that are pouring into China to participate in this forum, because they know this is the best path forward. When was the last time we had a whole bunch of African leaders come to the United States for something like this? Wouldn't it be nice to have traffic cops shutting down San Francisco so that African leaders could come in? We could have this great summit on how America is going to participate in the infrastructure revolution of Africa. Nope, we just got our asses kicked out of a $110 million airbase in Niger because we suck, because all we offer is war. We don't know anything other than war. If you don't yield to our warmongering ways, we will what? Well, we got kicked out by Niger. Then we tried to go to Chad. We lied to them, and the Chadian Air Force went, what are you doing here? That's not part of our status support. And they kicked us out there. The world's waking up to the fact that the United States, we're just a bunch of uniforms. And the uniforms end up costing the nations lives and resources at a time when the nations need to make the standard of living of their citizens better, and to maximize the economic potential of their resources. We don't think like that in America. We just want to put a base in, put drones in, and fire hellfires at people.
Yeah, maybe. And to close, I just want to say that in that experience, I was with someone from Beijing Review, and a journalist, and he was driving a car, and I was in his car, and we were having a hard time navigating. We were like getting stuck in traffic and then trying to take side roads. Wasn't working out, and so there was a moment where I was like, hey, do you want to just ask that traffic cop to let you through? And he was just like, absolutely not. That will go nowhere. This is way more important than us. and then I asked him about Africa, and China, Africa, and he was just like, we love Africa, we love Africans because we see people around the world. We used to be poor. When we know that people are poor around the world, like, we want to help them, we want to do what we can. But he also said something pragmatic too. He was just like, look, and this is what I find to be 100% true from anyone I speak to about China, Africa, or China Belt and Road Initiative. It's both. There is, of course, a component of wanting everyone to win, but then there's also a component of it helps China. If you produce many things, too many things, you need to sell them to other people. But if people don't have money to buy those things, that's exactly what he said. If people don't have money to buy those things, then you can't sell those things. So actually, the Belt and Road Initiative, a lot of it is about helping countries for themselves build up their standard of living. As you said, Scott, how important it is. They can build up their standard of living, and then, look at that. You have the second biggest landmass and continent in the world, and one of the richest, now people there have money in their pockets, and they have the money to buy things like your electric vehicles, like all of this extra manufacturing product that you just simply cannot sell with the rapid pace of production that occurs in China. You just cannot sell that back to the Chinese population. There's just going to be way too much of it. So there's a pragmatism here too. But yeah, the BRICS summit's going to be really huge, and it's an exciting moment, and I'll definitely have to have you back on, Scott, when it is occurring. But two announcements, though, I wanted to do before we head out of here, Scott. So first, I know that you've been promoting an event that is occurring. This is unfortunate because both of these events are now on the same day, which was something I was not prepared for. But the Peace and Freedom Rally, I know, is occurring on September 28th. I don't know if you want to say a word about it before we head out of here. I know that it's going to be in upstate New York, and here's the flyer for it. So, yeah.
I mean, the Peace and Freedom Rally, is an idea of Gerald Celente. He's the editor of Trends magazine, a man who is well known for his ability to do predictive analysis. I respect him a lot because historically he's gotten a lot of things right. I mean, he's also just a hell of a good guy, but he's totally dedicated to the cause of peace. And this year, he and I had a discussion together with Judge Andrew Napolitano, and it's an election year. And so we've incorporated what I call Operation Dawn. It's basically drawn from a challenge I put out to the American people. I mean, we're in an election year, and look, I saw in the chat, I'm not supposed to read the chats, but I do. And
listen to your wife, Scott.
Why don't you talk about the debate? Well, okay, it sucked. There, we talked about the debate.
Cats and dogs getting eaten, and then Kamala Harris talking about plans and dreams. Okay, we're done.
But the interesting thing is the only person that mentioned nuclear war and the danger was Donald Trump. He didn't have a plan, but at least he mentioned it.
True. Yeah.
I am of the opinion that while every issue out there is important and shouldn't be ignored and must be factored in, there's only one that deals with the existential survival of our country and the world, and that's nuclear war. And it's not being discussed. It's not being debated. And so my basically Dawn was a challenge. It basically, asking the American people, what would you do to save democracy in America, to save the world with your vote in November, DAWN. And what I tell people is stop giving your vote away. I mean, here it is September. We have 2 months, a little bit more, a little bit less than 2 months before the election. Did you give your vote away? If you already said, I'm voting for Kamala or I'm voting for Donald Trump, then you don't count anymore. They don't care about you because you gave your vote away. They're not going to woo you. They're not going to listen to your concerns. What they're going to go after are those undecided people. Those people are saying, I feel strongly about this, that, and the other thing. And you see that. If you're undecided, they're going to come courting. I'm hoping that we can get more Americans to say, I'm undecided, and my issue is, how do you stop nuclear war? How do you, what is your plan, Kamala? What is your plan, Donald? How do you stop nuclear war? What are you going to do to prevent this disastrous policy in Ukraine from spinning out of control and creating nuclear war? So I'm going to do that. And, so that was my contribution to bring into this rally for peace, the concept of empowering American democracy by insisting that people earn our vote. In the case of me, I'm trying to get people to agree that the issue that matters most right now is stopping a nuclear war, because if we don't, nothing else matters. Literally, nothing else matters. But there are other things going on. We have the frontal assault on free speech taking place today. Frontal assault on free speech. The trial that
chilling, really.
We've got the we've got the jury out right now. It's amazing. It's supposed to be a 3-week trial, and the federal case collapsed in a week. All lies. It's amazing. They brought in the head FBI guy. They said, you accuse this guy of working with Russian intelligence to steal an election for the mayor of St. Petersburg.
Evidence.
Do you have any evidence of this? Nope. Do you have any evidence that the Russians were? Nope. Do you have any evidence in television? Nope. But you put it in the affidavit. Yep. It was a lie. It's all a lie, but it's an assault on free speech. We have that taking place. We got my own situation coming out today. There was a very interesting post in from RT. Apparently, and we don't know when this happened, but sometime recently, the FBI sent 20 special agents to the home of an RT employee in Miami and physically assaulted her. In addition to doing a search of her house and seizure of her electronics, they physically inspected her body, and that's exactly what it means. She felt violated because she was violated. But then she talked about the interrogation that they put her through, 5 hours. About Margaret Simenon, the head of RT. Stupid question. Come on, FBI, do your due diligence. Has she ever met with Putin? Dude, all you have to do is Google and you'll see she met with Putin. Has she ever discussed her damn budget's a public record? I mean, the ignorance there. But then she said they spent an inordinate amount of time talking about Scott Ritter, me. So the FBI raids her. I don't know who this person is. I don't have a relationship with this person. And all they wanted to talk about is me, in my role and what I was doing. Why? Because of what I published with RT? Because I published some op-eds? Because I had RT provide some graphic support for videos that I made? RT had no control over the content whatsoever. They just helped, make it look prettier. They throw in a graphic here and everything so that, people would be, somewhat entertained by the video. Paid me $250 for each video. I'm turning out that I'm the dumbest person in the world, Danny. I am so stupid because they paid, these right-wing influencers.
Tim Pool, right?
$500,000, $5 million. I'm like, what the hell? I need to get a better agent. I'm working my ass off for $250 a product, and they're just getting this. But the RT money was 7% of my income last year. I mean, it's good to take my wife out to dinner. Helps pay a bill here or there, but I was not an employee of RT. I wasn't beholden to RT. RT didn't define my life, didn't define anything I did. And yet the FBI is now making me appear to be the number one threat to American, election security because I wrote some damn op-eds for RT. The stupidity of this is beyond belief. And they physically assaulted, sexually assaulted, if you want to be precise, a woman, employee of RT, because they were trying to make a point. What point are they trying to make? Again, we come back to scared of their own shadow. The United States no longer has the ability to stand up toe-to-toe with the Russians and say, let's throw the ideas on the table. Let's have a debate. Let's have a discussion. We did that during the Soviet Union. We weren't afraid of Soviet propaganda. We came back with our own. They weren't afraid of ours. We had a battle of ideas, and guess what? We won. We won. I'm not saying we beat the Russians today. I'm saying that why are we scared of our own shadows? If we think the Russians have an idea out there that we don't like, come up with a better idea. Free speech is absolute, but in the United States today, free speech is the enemy. Because as I said earlier about the Uhura 3, the judge has said clearly that free speech isn't, disinformation is about promulgating lies. Disinformation is just simply about challenging the government narrative. So therefore, when saying Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction, I was engaged in disinformation because even though what I said was true, it went against the narrative. This is the insanity of America. So Judge Andrew Napolitano is going to be addressing free speech, very important issue. And then we have Max Blumenthal and his wife Anya Parampil. I didn't want to bring in Gaza. I didn't want to. When I talked to Gerald initially, I wanted this to be focused on peace and this. Gaza is very divisive. But the fact is, we can't talk about peace unless we talk about Gaza. And there's no better people to talk about Gaza than Max Blumenthal and Anya Parampil. So they're going to come in and they're going to bring that dimension. So, it's going to be 4 hours of, some very intense discussions, very intense presentations. And then we're going to have some entertainment. I mean, because otherwise people just get depressed and go get drunk. What we want people to do is there'll be some entertainment, some live music, there will be food, there will be things. We want to shut down the thruway. Now, we may not be able to do that because there's competing events, et cetera. But if you live in the New York area and you're not going to Washington, D.C. for the Rage Against the War Machine rally that's taking place there, come to Kingston. Help us fulfill our goal and objective. I'd like, and Gerald would like, nothing more than to have Kingston shut down for the afternoon. I'm sorry, Kingston no longer functions because 500,000 people showed up. I'm sorry, there's lines on the thruway. People want to get to the rally, they park their cars like they did with Woodstock and walk down to Kingston. That's what we want to do. Now, we're probably not going to do it, but it would certainly be nice to at least make the effort. But the thing is, we're going to be streaming this live. We call it a family of podcasts because the people that I just identified, between Gerald Celente with his own podcast, Judge Napolitano, The Gray Zone, and Ask the Inspector. We have a family of podcasts. And so we're going to be streaming this all day long, going out to those podcasts. And we're going to ask other people who stream like you to help promote it, to encourage your audiences to watch. So even if we don't get, let's say we get 5,000 people, that'd be a strong event. 5,000 people show up in Kingston. But if we get 5 million people to watch it, we've already won. We're influencing people. And so that's what this rally is about. It's online education, in-person education, entertainment. Between the hours of 2 and 6 on Saturday, tune in. You may learn a couple things. You may get motivated. And who knows, you may decide that you're not going to give your vote away. You're going to make them earn it. And whether you want to make them earn it about Gaza, whether you want to make them earn it about free speech, whether you want to make them earn it about nuclear war, whether you want to make them earn it about peace, make the candidates earn your vote by defining what your positions are. And what we're trying to do on September 28th is help bring clarity to these various issues so you can define them in a way that challenges the candidates.
Yes. So everyone, definitely go to scottritter.com, find all the information for that event. Unfortunately, there's a competing event, but I don't like to see it as competing that I will be speaking at because you could actually do both if you're not going to go. So I encourage everyone, of course, if you can go to Kingston, participate in the rally. If you cannot, watch it online. And you can also, if it's easier for you to go to New York, you can go to an event on the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. We're going to be doing a heavy education on China in this event. We'll be at the Malcolm X Betty Shabazz Center in New York City. Lots of interesting speakers here. Not just me, but people like Gerald Horn, mutual friend Margaret Kimberly, and so many more who will be talking about China, the hybrid war on China, so many things. You can find that link in the video description. It'll be 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. the same day. So for those of you who are going to be just online, you can actually register for both of these events, catch some of mine, catch much of the Peace and Freedom rally. So certainly there's no competition here. It's easier for you to go to an event in New York City, come to the one here in New York. If you find the Peace and Freedom rally much more important, go out there. Certainly, but make sure you go to scottritter.com, find information for that rally. You can find the Eventbrite for the China event in the video description. Scott, any final words before we head out of here tonight? It's been a whirlwind and a great talk. Any final words?
We've thrown a lot of words out there. I would just tell people, this isn't an academic exercise. This isn't about, I don't come on here and spend 2 hours with you just to talk. There are real problems out there that need real solutions, and we have leadership that aren't capable of providing those solutions. We don't have many options available to us, we the people of the United States, but one of the things that we do have is the power of the vote, and we have a very important election coming up. And a lot of people are, they're worn out by the process. They've lost hope. They lack faith in the system because the system has failed them over and over and over again. But the consequences of doing nothing could be fatal. By doing nothing, we empower those who are in a position of power to continue the policies that are leading us down the path of potential nuclear annihilation. The only way that we're going to change is to force these people to change on our behalf. And we can do that by, and especially in this election year, where the margins are going to be so tight. I mean, we don't have good options. I mean, I know there's very strong Kamala Harris supporters out there, and there's very strong Donald Trump supporters out there. But come on, guys, reflect on it. 340 million people in this country, and those are the two we get to vote for. This is problematic, but they're the choices we have. So the question is not that we can't make better choices. What we can do is make these bad choices make better decisions. And this is where we have to come together and create, in the time that we have available, some sort of political, critical mass around these issues, make these issues resonate, make them count, force the candidates to pay attention so that they have to address them. And then hopefully once they address them, then we can make a decision, who we want to vote for, and hold that person accountable for the decisions they made. It's not going to be easy, but that's where we're at right now. That's why I come on and I talk with Danny. That's why I do all this, because it's about empowering people with knowledge and information and getting the people motivated to be active in this process we call American democracy. As imperfect as it is, it's the only process we have right now available to us. Revolution. Nah, I can't promote. I'm not promoting revolution. Civil war. Nope. I'm a constitutionalist. I believe in trying to achieve change through constitutionally approved processes. Yes, FBI, that means that I am trying to interfere in the American elections the way every American should seek to interfere in the election, by imposing my will on those candidates so that they do what I want them to do. After all, isn't that what this great country is about? They work for us. I don't work for them.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Really, it should be the bare minimum that those who proclaim to be our leaders, political leaders, be under the influence of those who vote them in. Isn't that what the United States says it is all about? It's all about people getting voted in, and then those people representing the people who vote them in. It shouldn't be so strange or even foreign. We shouldn't even have to use the term interference, but here we are at this moment. But Scott, it was great. We are going to head out of here. Thank you to everyone who gave a super chat. I ran your super chat across the screen as Scott was talking. We didn't have time to get to them in depth. There's only one question, but appreciate all of you. Thanks so much. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Go to the video description, find scottritter.com. Also find all the ways to support this channel, patreon.com, as well as Substack and so many other options. You can become a YouTube member. Please do support this channel. Make sure you go to Scott's website, and we are out of here. Thanks so much. Have a good rest of your evening. Bye-bye.